He spoke without hesitation. Every sentence sounded convincing. But confidence isn't evidence. When the judge asked for proof, the pause that followed felt endless, because in that silence the truth began to surface. My name is Daniel Carter, and that man in the tailored suit, spinning his flawless web of lies, was my husband. For 7 years I believed every promise, every late-night business trip, every tender word. I built my world around him. But here, in this sterile courtroom, under the weight of a divorce he swore he never wanted, I was finally seeing the real man. The man who claimed his startup was soaring while secretly draining our joint accounts. The man who wept, begging for reconciliation, while his lawyer filed motions to strip me of everything. He stood before the judge, a picture of wounded integrity, painting me as unstable, entitled, forgetful. He lied with the calm certainty of someone who's gotten away with it for a lifetime. And for a moment I felt that old, familiar doubt creep in. Had I misunderstood? Was I wrong? Then the judge leaned forward, her glasses glinting. "That's a compelling narrative, Mr. Carter," she said. "Now let's see the documentation to support it." The color drained from his face. The performance was over. The reckoning had begun. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and comment where you're watching from. The air in courtroom 603 was cool, almost cold, but a feverish sweat prickled under the collar of my simple linen blouse. I kept my hands clasped tightly in my lap, my knuckles pushing against the skin like pale little mountains. To look down at them was to see a map of my own tension. But I couldn't look away from him for long. Marcus. My husband, the plaintiff, the performer. He sat in the witness stand not like a man being questioned, but like a guest lecturer offering a compelling, if slightly tragic, TED Talk. His posture was an art form, relaxed but engaged, leaning forward towards his own lawyer, Michael Rostov, with an earnest sincerity that made you want to lean in too. He wore the navy suit I'd helped him pick out for our 3rd anniversary, the one that brought out the flecks of gray he'd started to get at his temples. Distinguished, trustworthy. A man who shouldered responsibility with a quiet sigh. "Michael," he said, using his lawyer's first name with a collegial warmth that felt staged for the judge, "it's important to understand the context. Etha wasn't just a business. It was a vision, a leap of faith that Alina and I decided on together." He shifted his gaze then to me. His blue eyes, the color of a summer lake, held mine. There was no anger in them, only a profound, wounded confusion that made my stomach clench. We were a team. We always talked about building something, leaving a legacy. The capital calls, the reinvestment of our savings, these were never secrets. They were shared sacrifices for a shared dream. A shared dream. The phrase echoed in the hollowed-out chamber of my chest. I remembered the dreams, all right. They were mine first. A small design studio, a portfolio of clients I'd nurtured, the freedom to create. He'd called it a cute hobby. Etha, his blockchain-based logistics platform, was the real empire. Our joint savings, the fund my grandmother left me, all funneled into the vision. And I had believed. I'd nodded as he explained the complex terms, feeling simultaneously proud of his intelligence and stupid for my own confusion. Rostov, a man with the sleek demeanor of a SEAL, guided him through the timeline. The initial investment, the bridge funding, the critical infrastructure upgrades. Each withdrawal from our accounts, Marcus explained with patient clarity, was a necessary, calculated step. He painted a picture of a husband heroically bearing the immense stress of entrepreneurship while shielding his delicate wife from the harsh realities of cash flow. "And is it true," Rostov asked, his voice smooth as oil, "that as these pressures mounted, Mrs. Carter's tolerance for financial risk diminished?" Marcus sighed, a soft, weary sound that seemed to hold the weight of the world. "Alina is an artist, a beautiful soul. She lives in a world of emotion and aesthetics. Spreadsheets run rates, burn rates. They aren't just boring to her, they're anxiety-inducing. I took it upon myself to manage it all to protect her from that stress." "Perhaps," he said, glancing at the judge, Honorable Judge Wilkins, a stern woman with a steely gray bun and eyes that missed nothing. "Perhaps that was my mistake. In trying to shield her, I made the finances seem opaque. When the market shifted and we had to double down, she saw it as a loss, not an investment. She grew fearful. The argument started. I felt the eyes of the room on me. The board clerk, the young stenographer, the uniformed bailiff. They saw a woman in a plain blouse, her face probably pale, listening to her handsome, articulate husband explain her fragility. They didn't see the nights I'd spent hunched over the kitchen table with a calculator and a year's worth of bank statements, my confusion hardening into a cold, sick dread. They didn't see the business trips to Austin where his location sharing was mysteriously off. They didn't smell the unfamiliar, floral perfume on his jacket. Let's talk about the marriage itself, Rostov transitioned seamlessly. Despite these tensions, you never wanted it to end. Never. The word was a bullet fired with perfect conviction. Marcus's voice broke just slightly, a masterful crack in the armor. Elena is my life. The past 18 months have been difficult. The strain on the business created a strain at home, but I fought for us. I suggested counseling. I wrote emails trying to reconnect, to remind her of who we were before the storm. He produced a single printed sheet from the table before him. This is just one example, Your Honor. From this past December, I'm not proud of airing our private words, but I need you to understand my heart. He read aloud. His voice, now softer, filled the quiet room. My dearest Elena, I passed the cafe where we had our first date today. The little table in the corner is still there. I sat and remembered how you laughed at my terrible joke about the cappuccino foam. I would give anything to hear that laugh again, to see the light in your eyes that isn't shadowed by worry or resentment. This is just a season, my love, a hard winter. We will find our spring again. Always, Marcus. It was a beautiful letter, tender, nostalgic, perfectly pitched. I remembered receiving it. I'd cried over it, my tears smudging the ink on my iPad screen. I'd almost called him. Then 3 days later, I'd found the credit card statement for a boutique in that same city, dated the day before the email, for a necklace I never received. The memory of that whiplash, the soaring hope followed by the nauseating plummet, threatened to drown me right there in the courtroom. My lawyer, Rita Chen, placed a firm, steadying hand on my forearm under the table. Rostov moved in for the kill. So if you were so committed, Mr. Carter, how do you explain Mrs. Carter's sudden filing for divorce and her claims of, what should we call it, systematic financial deception? Marcus looked down, the picture of a man grappling with a painful mystery. I think Elena became overwhelmed. Her friends, particularly Sarah, who's been through her own bitter divorce, they fed her fears. They told her she was being taken advantage of. She has a tendency, he said gently, as if relaying a delicate medical diagnosis, to be impressionable, to absorb the emotions of those around her. After her medical leave last year, she seemed more fragile, more susceptible to these kinds of narratives. Medical leave. He said it with such compassionate concern. The vertigo, the world spinning wildly for days on end, the vomiting. The terror of a brain tumor that turned out to be a profound stress-induced neurological glitch. He'd driven me to the appointments, held my hair back, my protector. Now, he offered it up as evidence of my instability, my inability to handle reality. He built his castle word by perfect word. A castle where he was the steadfast, misunderstood builder and I was the skittish inhabitant, afraid of the very walls meant to keep me safe. He spoke of my forgetfulness with a husband's patient exasperation. How I'd lose track of passwords, misplace important mail. He never accused, he explained. He made my growing paranoia, my frantic search for truth, sound like the symptoms of a breakdown. Judge Wilkins listened, her face an impassive mask, taking occasional notes. I couldn't read her. The dread was a physical weight on my lungs. What if she believed him? What if his performance was just that good? He finished with a summation that was not for Rostov but directly for the judge. Your Honor, I love my wife. I have made mistakes, perhaps in communication, in assuming too much responsibility. But a liar, a thief, that is not who I am. Everything I did, every dollar I moved was for us, for our future. I am here not to fight her but to finally make her see the truth so we can begin to heal. Silence that followed was thick. He had been flawless, confident, specific, emotionally compelling. He'd preempted my arguments, reframed my evidence as confusion, and wrapped it all in a banner of devoted love. I felt the old, familiar fog of doubt descend. Had I constructed this entire nightmare from fragments of misunderstanding and other people's bitterness? Was my memory of the perfume wrong? Had the boutique purchase been a gift for a client? The vertigo had scrambled my senses for a while. Just as the crushing uncertainty reached its peak, Rita stood. She was a small woman, but she carried a gravity that silenced rooms. "Thank you, Mr. Rostov. No further questions from me at this time." She paused, letting the expectation build. "However, Your Honor, before we proceed to cross-examination, the respondent has a preliminary matter regarding the plaintiff's testimony." Judge Wilkins looked up. "Proceed, Ms. Chen." Rita's voice was clear and dry. "The plaintiff has provided a detailed narrative of joint financial decisions, business investments, and communicative intent. Given the specific monetary figures and claims of transparency he has asserted under oath, the respondent requests that the plaintiff now produce the corresponding documentation to substantiate his testimony before we continue. Specifically, the complete set of financial records for the entity ETHA LLC for the past 3 years, including bank statements, profit and loss statements, and the capitalization table showing the alleged reinvestment of marital funds. Furthermore, he referenced specific emails of reconciliation. We request the full, unredacted email chain from the referenced period, not a curated excerpt." It was a legal move, but it felt like a physical one, like someone had kicked the leg out from under a beautifully set table. Marcus didn't flinch, but the energy around him shifted. The relaxed lecturer vanished, replaced by a CEO in a boardroom facing a hostile takeover. "Your Honor," he said, his voice still steady but a fraction tighter, "my counsel has provided comprehensive documentation in discovery." Judge Wilkins peered over her glasses. "Ms. Chen is not referring to discovery provided to opposing counsel. She is asking you now, under your current testimony, to produce the documents that directly support the claims you have just made from the stand. The business records proving the destiny of the marital funds you mentioned. The complete communication thread. Do you have them with you today?" The pause was infinitesimal, but in the dead air of the courtroom it stretched into a chasm. I saw his eyes flicker just once to Rostov. The lawyer stood quickly. "Your Honor, we have summaries. We have the selected emails in evidence. We have the—" "Summaries are not proof, Mr. Rostov," Judge Wilkins interrupted, her tone not unkind but utterly immovable. "Selected emails are not a full record. The court has heard a story. Now it requires the receipts. Mr. Carter, you testified clearly. Do you have the documents to back up that testimony? Yes or no?" All the color, the charming vitality seemed to drain from Marcus's face, leaving behind the waxy pallor of a mannequin. His mouth opened, then closed. The confident baritone that had filled the room moments ago was gone. In its place was a hollow, strained sound. The full records are with my accountant. The emails, I'd need to access the server." Another silence, this one heavier, more profound. It was no longer just a pause, it was an admission. In that endless, quiet moment, as he sat there perfectly still in his beautiful suit, the magnificent edifice of words he had built began to tremble. The first dust of plaster sifted down from the ceiling. The truth, silent and patient, finally lifted its head. The silence wasn't broken by a voice, but by a sound so ordinary it was jarring. The dry, rasping cough of the bailiff by the door. It snapped the tension like a twig. Marcus's lawyer, Rostov, was already on his feet, his previously slick demeanor now showing the frantic energy of a man trying to plug a leaking dam. "Your Honor," Rostov said, the oil in his voice replaced by a strained politeness, "if the court would indulge us a brief recess. There appears to be a logistical issue with the specific documents referenced. They were of course produced in discovery, but the physical binders for today's hearing." Judge Wilkins' expression did not change. It was the look of someone who had seen this particular play performed many times before and never found the ending surprising. A logistical issue, counselor. Your client just spent 45 minutes providing intricate detail under oath. He spoke of specific transfers, specific dates, specific intentions. The court expects those details to be readily verifiable. They are verifiable, Your Honor, Rostov insisted, a bead of sweat tracing a path from his temple. A simple misunderstanding. With 20 minutes, we can retrieve the correct files from our office. The judge looked from Rostov's pleading face to Marcus, who had recovered some composure, his chin lifted in a show of affronted cooperation. Very well. 20-minute recess. Mr. Carter, I advise you and your counsel to use this time effectively. When we resume, you will answer the question directly, with evidence in hand, or we will proceed under the presumption that you cannot. The gavel cracked. The sound made me jump. My hands were icy. Rita leaned close, her voice a low, steady murmur in my ear. Steady, Alina. The first crack is always the hardest to make. Now the pressure is inside his dam, not yours. Don't look at him. Come with me. She led me out of the courtroom, a firm hand on my elbow. We didn't go to the crowded hallway where I could see Rostov already hissing into his phone, Marcus standing rigidly beside him, a monument to controlled panic. Rita guided me to a small, windowless consultation room. The air was stale, smelling of old coffee and dust. Sit, she said, not unkindly. I sank into a plastic chair. The full weight of what had just happened began to crash over me in waves. The vertigo feeling threatened to return, the room tilting not on its axis, but on the axis of my entire past. He was so believable, I whispered, my voice sounding foreign to me. Every word. I started to, Rita, what if I'm wrong? What if it's all just a misunderstanding and I've done this? The old programming, the deep-wired instinct to doubt my own perception to preserve the peace, surged up like a sickness. Rita sat across from me, placing her leather portfolio on the table with a decisive thud. She didn't offer empty comfort. She opened the portfolio, revealing the neat tabbed sections of our own evidence. Look at this, Alina. She didn't point to a document but to a photo paperclip to a bank statement. It was a picture I'd taken last summer of us at a beach barbecue with friends. Marcus was mid-laugh, his arms slung around my shoulders, pulling me close. I was smiling, but my eyes, if you looked closely, had a distant, glassy look. I remembered that day. He'd been texting constantly, said it was a work crisis. I'd spent the afternoon feeling alone in a crowd, blaming myself for being needy. That man in the photo, Rita said, her finger tapping the image of Marcus's smiling face, and the man on the stand telling a story about protecting his fragile wife are the same man. The story is just a different costume. You didn't imagine the texts. You didn't imagine the empty accounts. You didn't imagine the perfume. She flipped to another tab, to a screenshot of a banking portal. He gave us the script, Alina. He talked about the Ether Capital call in March of last year. A transfer of $85,000. Here is where it actually went. She pointed to a line entry. It wasn't to Ether LLC. It was to something called Horizon Asset Management. A few pages behind, a report from our forensic accountant linked Horizon to a shell company that paid the lease on a luxury apartment in the city's trendy waterfront district. An apartment I had never seen. The truth isn't a feeling, Alina. It's a paper trail. And his trail is a maze of lies. Yours, she said, tapping our meticulous binders, is a straight line. All you have to do is hold the line. Can you do that? I looked from the damning bank statement to the cheerful beach photo. The cognitive dissonance was agony. But in that agony, a spark of anger finally caught, clean, sharp, and clarifying. He hadn't just taken money, he'd taken my reality and warped it into a narrative where he was the hero. He'd used my illness, my trust, my love as props. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the stale air filling my lungs with resolve. Yes, I said, my voice stronger now. I can. The 20 minutes passed in a blur of Rita's calm, last-minute strategizing. When we re-entered the courtroom, the energy had shifted palpably. The board clerks were now subtly attentive. The stenographer's fingers hovered over her machine. Judge Wilkins resumed the bench, her gaze immediately finding Marcus. He was back in the witness stand, but the effortless ownership of space was gone. He looked like a man bracing for impact. Before him were two slim folders, not the thick binders one would expect for years of complex business records. "Mr. Carter," Judge Wilkins began, not bothering with Rostov, "have you retrieved the documents?" Marcus cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we have here a summary of the relevant ETHA financials prepared by my accountant and the complete email chain as requested." His words were correct, but the musical confidence was gone. The notes were flat. Rita stood. "Your Honor, if I may, since the plaintiff has ostensibly complied, I would ask to approach and examine the documents before we proceed, to ensure they are responsive to the court's specific order." "Granted." Rita walked to the stand, a predator with a serene gait. She picked up the first folder, the financial summary. It was maybe 10 pages. She leafed through it slowly. The room was so quiet I could hear the rustle of each page. She paused, frowned, looked back at the first page. Then she turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this is a 3-page profit and loss statement from last year, showing significant losses, not the 3 years of records requested. There are no bank statements. There is no capitalization table showing marital fund investment. There is, in fact, no documentation of any transfer from the joint marital accounts to ETHA LLC at all. This document is non-responsive." Rostov leapt up. "It shows the state of the business. It contextualizes the need for reinvestment." "It shows losses," Rita corrected. Turning a page. "It does not show my client's money funding those losses. That is the heart of the matter." She then picked up the second folder. "As for the emails, this is a printout of the same single, curated email Mr. Carter read aloud earlier, and 2 others of similar tone from different months. The chain is missing all intervening correspondence. It is, again, a selection, not a record." Judge Wilkins' lips thinned. "Mr. Carter, this is unacceptable. You are under oath. Where are the business bank statements? Where are the transfer receipts? Where is the full, unedited communication from your email server for the date range in question?" Marcus shifted in his seat. The waxy pallor was back. "The bank statements, ETHA used a digital-only platform. The access, there were technical issues. The emails, I printed the relevant ones. The rest are their personal, mundane, about dinner plans, errands." "Your Honor," Rita said, her voice cutting through his floundering, "the respondent has no such technical issues. We have the documents." She didn't wait for permission. She carried our first set of binders to the clerk, who began distributing copies to the judge and to Rostov. "With the court's indulgence, I will now enter into evidence what the plaintiff cannot or will not provide." What followed was a methodical, devastating dismantling. Rita didn't shout. She narrated. She used a projector screen we'd prearranged, casting every damning line item onto a pale square of wall for the entire room to see. Exhibit A, the financial truth, not a summary, the raw, unfiltered bank statements from our joint account. Rita highlighted with a laser pointer a transfer of $85,000 on March 15. Plaintiff testified this went to ETHA. The laser dot moved to the recipient, Horizon Asset Management. Next slide. A corporate record search showing Horizon's sole director was Marcus's college friend. Next slide. Lease agreements showing Horizon as the lessee of a luxury waterfront apartment. Next slide. Security camera timestamp obtained via a subpoena to the building, showing Marcus entering the building on multiple dates, once with a woman whose face was blurred but whose silhouette was decidedly not mine. Marcus's voice was a strained rasp. That was a potential investor suite for out-of-town venture capitalists. Rita didn't even acknowledge him. She moved to the next transaction, $22,500 to Valkyrie Imports. Next slide. A credit memo from Valkyrie Imports for a bespoke silver necklace. Next slide. An Instagram photo, public profile of the same woman from the blurred security still, dated a week later, wearing a distinctive silver necklace. The caption, "Early birthday gift from M. Dizzy." A low murmur went through the courtroom. Marcus had gone completely still. Exhibit B, the death of Etha. Rita displayed a state business registry record. Etha LLC was formally dissolved 14 months ago. She then showed the registration for his new venture, Nexus Dynamics. Its listed assets, $500. This is the empire, Your Honor. Dissolved over a year ago while the plaintiff continued to tell my client and this court it was consuming their life savings. The new entity was a pivot, Marcus burst out, his control finally shattering. A strategic rebranding. The assets are intellectual property. You can't value that on a state form. Judge Wilkins fixed him with a stare. You are still under oath, Mr. Carter. You will answer questions, not volunteer defenses to evidence you claimed you couldn't produce. The trap was sprung. Rita moved in for the second act. Exhibit C, the reconciliation charade. She displayed the full email chain from a shared account I'd forgotten we had. On the screen, Marcus's two tender emails were like lonely flowers in a desert of cold, logistical correspondence. From Marcus, October 12, "Did you cancel the home insurance? The agent called me." From Marcus, November 3, "I'll be in Austin the 15th 20. Don't schedule the landscaper." From Marcus, December 10, the day before his poetic memory of the cafe email, "Sarah's lawyer called. Tell her to stop contacting my counsel directly. It's harassment." And then the clincher, a calendar invite, sent from Marcus's work account to his personal one. For the weekend of the healing getaway he tearfully described in his testimony, a weekend he claimed we'd spent at a secluded cabin trying to reconnect. The invite was for a team offsite at a resort in Napa Valley. The attendee list included several names and one email address, Alyssa@ValkyrieImports.com. "Your Honor," Rita said quietly, "we have no evidence the respondent was ever in Napa Valley that weekend. Her phone's location data, which the plaintiff himself insisted we share for safety, places her at her sister's home in the city, where she was recovering from a severe bout of vertigo." She put my phone records on the screen next to his calendar invite. The dissonance was mute, brutal, and absolute. Marcus was crumbling in real time. His shoulders slumped. He kept running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, destroying it. When Rita presented the final piece, a screenshot from a tablet backup showing a Tinder notification, "You have a new match," dated during his so-called period of dedicated reconciliation. He didn't even try to explain. He just stared at the damning glow of the projector screen, his own lies reflected back at him in stark, undeniable pixels. Rostov objected weakly, but the wind was gone from his sails. The performance was over. All that remained was the wreckage of the set, and the man standing in the middle of it, exposed not as a misunderstood visionary, but as a common, clumsy liar. The confident narrative had been replaced by a silent, scrolling testimony of receipts, dates, and digital footprints. The paper trail didn't just contradict him, it erased him, replacing the tragic hero with a cheap, greedy fraud. And in the terrible, revealing silence that followed the last slide, everyone in the room could see it. The silence after the last projected image, the garish, mocking orange of the Tinder notification, was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't just an absence of noise. It was the sound of a persona shattering into dust. Marcus didn't move. He stared at the now blank screen on the wall as if it had burned the afterimage of his own deceit permanently onto his retinas. The elegant architecture of his lies lay in ruins around him, and he was sitting in the rubble. Judge Wilkins broke the stillness. She removed her glasses slowly and placed them on the bench before her. She didn't look at Rostov, who seemed to be mentally calculating the damage. She looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Rostov," she said, her voice devoid of any inflection that could be read as sympathy or anger. It was the pure, cold tone of jurisprudence. "Does your client have any further testimony to offer regarding these exhibits?" Rostov stood, a man defeated but bound by duty to go through the motions. Your Honor, we would request a continuance to allow us to review this avalanche of new material from the respondent. Much of it is out of context, and some of it borders on a violation of privacy. Denied, Judge Wilkins said, the word falling like a blade. The avalanche, as you call it, is the direct evidentiary response to your client's sworn testimony. He opened the door with his specificity. The respondent has merely walked through it. Privacy is forfeit when one places their character and intentions at the heart of litigation. She turned her gaze back to Marcus. The court's question stands, Mr. Carter. Do you have anything to add to your testimony in light of this evidence? Marcus's mouth worked, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping on a dock. The silver-tongued orator was gone. Finally, he managed a hoarse, "I'd like to consult with my counsel." "You may do so, briefly." Rostov scurried to the witness stand and they bent their heads together in a furious, whispered conference. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Marcus's face. It cycled through pale shock to a flush of humiliation and finally settled into a grim, hardened mask. The wounded romantic was gone. In his place was the cornered strategist, calculating his last desperate moves. He nodded curtly at Rostov, who returned to his table. "The defense rests its case in chief, Your Honor," Rostov said, his voice thin. "Very well." Judge Wilkins' eyes swept to Rita. "Ms. Chen, does the respondent wish to call any witnesses?" Rita stood. "Yes, Your Honor, the respondent calls Elena Carter to the stand." A fresh jolt of adrenaline shot through me. This was it. Not to fight his fiction with more words, but to lay my simple, verifiable truth next to his elaborate fantasy. As I walked the short distance to the witness stand, I felt the weight of every gaze. But I didn't look at Marcus. I looked at Rita, a calm island in her dark suit, and then at the judge. I took the oath, my voice clear and steady in the hushed room. Rita's direct examination was a masterclass in restraint. She didn't ask me to describe my feelings. She didn't let me vent. She guided me through a factual reconstruction of my reality, using our evidence as a map. "Ms. Carter, you heard the plaintiff testify that you were unaware of the financial details of ETHA by design to protect you. Is that true?" "No," I said. "I asked, repeatedly, for budgets, for statements. He would tell me it was too complex, or that he'd handle it, or that he'd show me later. Later never came." "And the vertigo you experienced last year, did the plaintiff support you during that time?" "Physically, yes. He drove me to appointments. But when the doctor said the primary trigger was likely extreme, sustained stress, he told the doctor and me that I was prone to anxiety and had been imagining problems in our marriage." Rita nodded. She approached the bench with a single document. "Your Honor, this is a medical report from Dr. Annika Sharma, entered previously. It confirms the diagnosis of vestibular neuritis, explicitly notes stress as a major exacerbating factor, and contains no reference to any pre-existing psychological condition." "Noted," Judge Wilkins said, making a note on her pad. Rita saved the masterstroke for last. "Ms. Carter, the plaintiff testified under oath that you have a tendency to be forgetful and misplace important documents. Did you misplace the documents related to your joint finances?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment to dismantle his last insidious lie. "No, I didn't misplace them. They were kept in a locked filing cabinet in his home office, a room he referred to as his sanctum. I was not allowed to go in there uninvited. The lock was a digital keypad. I did not know the code." Rita projected a photo onto the screen. It was a picture I'd taken months ago when my suspicion had first curdled into certainty. It showed the sleek gray filing cabinet, the green LED of the keypad glowing faintly in the dim room. It was mundane. It was devastating. "And how did that make you feel, Ms. Carter?" Rita asked, her first foray into emotion. The question unlocked something. I wasn't speaking to Rita anymore, or even really to the judge. I was speaking to every version of myself that had believed him. It made me feel like a stranger in my own home, like a child, It made the vertigo worse because the ground under my feet wasn't just spinning. It was a lie he had built for me to stand on. Rita let that hang in the air for a 3 count. No further questions, Your Honor. Rostov rose for cross-examination, but the fight was gone. He tried a few half-hearted stabs, asking if I'd ever loved my husband, if I was now motivated by revenge. I answered simply, I loved the man I thought he was. I'm here for the truth. He soon sat down, defeated. What happened next was something Rita had told me was rare, but possible when a judge had heard enough. As Rostov announced he had no further witnesses, Judge Wilkins held up a hand. Given the extraordinary divergence between the sworn testimony of the plaintiff and the documented evidence presented by the respondent, and in the interest of judicial economy, this court will dispense with closing arguments and render an oral ruling on the preliminary motions before it. Marcus's head jerked up. Rostov looked stricken. An oral ruling here and now was a thunderclap of finality. It meant she'd seen all she needed to see. Judge Wilkins steepled her fingers, her eyes moving from the binders of evidence to Marcus, and then to me. Her voice, when she spoke, was measured, precise, and carried a weight that pressed down on the entire room. This is a case, she began, that hinges on credibility. The court has listened carefully to Mr. Carter's testimony. It was, on its surface, coherent, emotionally resonant, and specific. However, the primary duty of this court is not to be moved by a narrative, but to evaluate it against evidence. When directly challenged to produce the foundational documents for his story, Mr. Carter could not do so. The respondent, however, could and did. She leaned forward slightly. The evidence presented by Ms. Carter is not merely contradictory. It is dispositive. It demonstrates a pattern of deliberate financial obfuscation. Marital funds were not invested in a shared dream. They were funneled through shell companies to fund a separate life, an apartment, luxury gifts for a person not his wife. The business he claimed was their shared burden was dissolved over a year ago. His claims of a dedicated pursuit of reconciliation are directly contradicted by his own calendar and communications, which show not only absence, but deception. She picked up her glasses, not putting them on, but using them as a pointer. Most egregiously, the plaintiff took his wife's documented medical condition, a physical ailment caused by immense stress, and attempted to weaponize it in this courtroom. To use it as a tool to undermine her credibility and portray her as unstable is not only cruel, it demonstrates a fundamental lack of character. Each word was a nail in a coffin. Marcus had shrunk in his seat, his face ashen, his eyes fixed on the grain of the wooden table before him. Therefore, Judge Wilkins continued, her tone becoming decisively sharp, on the respondent's motions, the court finds as follows. The plaintiff's testimony is deemed not credible. The respondent has established a prima facie case of financial dissipation and concealment of assets. Pending final judgment, the court orders an immediate freezing of all accounts held solely in the plaintiff's name and the accounts of any entities under his control. The marital home is awarded as temporary exclusive domicile to the respondent, Ms. Carter. The court assigns full temporary responsibility for the marital debts, including those revealed here today, to the plaintiff. She wasn't done. Furthermore, given the plaintiff's demonstrable bad faith in the conduct of this litigation, providing false testimony and failing to comply with the spirit and letter of discovery, the court awards interim attorney's fees and costs, including the fees for the forensic accountant, to the respondent. Mr. Carter, you will write a check to Ms. Chen's firm in the amount of $47,000 within 14 days. The number hung in the air. It was almost the exact amount of one of the Ether Capital calls. The poetic justice was so brutal I almost gasped. This court is not a stage, Judge Wilkins concluded, her gaze boring into Marcus. It is a search for truth. You, Mr. Carter, attempted to offer a performance. Your performance has been evaluated. It has failed. Court is adjourned. The final crack of the gavel echoed like a gunshot. For a moment, there was no movement. Then, the room erupted into the low hum of murmured shock and the rustle of people gathering belongings. Marcus stood up so quickly his chair scraped back with a screech. He didn't look at me. He turned to Rostov, his face twisted with a fury so pure it was almost alien. "This is a farce," he hissed, too loud, not caring who heard. She set me up. Those documents are edited. That photo is." Rostov grabbed his arm, shushing him violently, and began pulling him towards the door. As they passed my table, Marcus's eyes, those Summer Lake eyes now stormy and dark, finally met mine. The look wasn't of love or loss or even hatred. It was the look of a magician whose last trick has been exposed, a mixture of shock, humiliation, and a grudging, furious respect for the audience member who figured out the wires. He had no words left. He simply stared, then was yanked away by his lawyer, disappearing into the hallway. I sat trembling, the judge's words still ringing in my ears. Not credible. Bad faith failed. Rita's hand was on my shoulder, squeezing. "Breathe, Alina, it's over. You did it." "It doesn't feel real," I whispered. "The check will feel real," Rita said with a small, wry smile. "Come on, let's get out of here." We walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was chaos, lawyers, clients, clerks. I saw Marcus and Rostov at the far end near the elevators, Rostov speaking into his phone with frantic intensity, Marcus packing a tight, angry circle, running both hands through his ruined hair. He was just a man. A tall, well-dressed, furious, and utterly ordinary man. The myth he'd built had been confined to room 603, and the door was now closed. The late afternoon sun hit me as I pushed through the courthouse's heavy brass doors. It was warm on my face. The city sounds, the rumble of buses, the chatter of pedestrians, the distant wail of a siren flooded in, loud and chaotic and real. I stopped on the top step, taking a deep breath of air that didn't smell of old wood and anxiety. Rita was talking about next steps, about the frozen assets, about the formal discovery hearing now made moot. I heard her, but the words flowed over me. The legal machinery would grind on, but the war was won. The truth had been judged. I looked down at my hands, no longer clenched. The pale mountains of my knuckles had relaxed. I felt an emptiness, but it wasn't the hollow dread of before. It was the clean, swept space emptiness of a room after a toxic presence has been removed. There was room to breathe. There was light. "Can I give you a ride?" Rita asked. "No," I said, the word surprising me with its certainty. "Thank you. I think I'll walk for a bit." She studied my face, then nodded. "Call me tomorrow." She headed towards the parking garage, a small woman carrying a very large victory. I walked down the courthouse steps, each one feeling lighter than the last. I didn't head for the subway. I just walked, letting the sun warm my skin, letting the noise of the living city fill the silent spaces he had left behind. He had taken so much money, trust, years, but he hadn't taken my name, my mind, or my future. The ground beneath my feet was solid. It was mine. And for the first time in a very, very long time, the world was not spinning. It was still and clear and waiting. I turned a corner, leaving the shadow of the courthouse behind, and stepped into the light of an ordinary, truthful afternoon.